Namaste, viewers, and welcome to Book Talk with Dr. Meenakshi Jain. Thank you, Dr. Jain, for joining us. Please tell us a little bit about your journey as a Delhi University college teacher in Gargi. I believe you joined Gargi College, and
Yes,
was it the history department there?
yes,
Luckily, because your MA was in history, and the UGC requires your MA to
in
be
history.
the subject in which you end up teaching. So
Yes,
your
MPhil was
PhD,
also in history.
right, right, right,
So all my degrees were in history,
right,
except for
right.
the last. The thing is that when I got a job, then I did not realize what an important role this job will play in my life. Many people think that, college job is nothing to be taken very seriously, and it's not really of the stature of a university job. Uh, I don't know how much merit there is, but the college job, it sustained me, and I'm so grateful for what it did. In the initial years, I was new to teaching, so a lot of the time went in preparing, and that preparing for lectures also gave me a new dimension to history. Because when you prepare for a lecture, you have to go in depth. Whereas if you are preparing for an MA or an MPhil exam, you can choose the topics that you want to focus on. So these initial years were gave me an opportunity to study all dimensions of history, Indian history, because I focused only on Indian history. I did not take up European history, though I taught Japanese history for a while, but my focus was on Indian history,
And
ancient medieval.
also, if I might add, when you start teaching a subject, you look at all the textbooks, you know,
Exactly.
and you made some pioneering studies of the NCRT textbooks. I remember those 12 points, that you pointed out, all the lacunae. But go ahead. You were telling us about your own journey as
Yeah.
a
So it
as a
was, uh, it sustained me. I'm grateful that I got the job. I'm sure there were so many other people vying for the same job. So, it's always, I feel it's very humbling, and one should always be humble about the opportunities you got and not be arrogant that, I deserved it or I deserved better. I never had that attitude. The job was, college was next to my house, so I could just cross the road and go there. And I used to see my colleagues coming from such distances. So the college had a very special and important place in my intellectual development and learning to get to the grips of the subject, which I would perhaps not have, because you focus on the topics that you are interested, but in the syllabus you have to cover the whole syllabus. And the history syllabus at that time was very, very extensive and rigorous. I have no uh, qualms in praising the vastness of the syllabus, I mean the scope of the syllabus.
So you taught
Now,
all areas and all subjects, or did you specialize
medieval
in
India
any
was
one of
my
them? Okay,
specialization,
okay,
but I
okay,
also
okay.
taught parts of Indian history as far as art and culture is concerned. That was also a subject that came later. But in the initial years, I had no problem at all. And perhaps one reason was that I was not into my own research. So all the time that I got, I devoted myself to preparing for the lectures. Over a period of time, uh, two things happened. One was that the syllabus, it was not so rigorous. The syllabus changed and new topics were introduced, which I mean, I don't know if I'm right in saying that diluted the rigor of history teaching. And so the students also were not required to put in that much effort. And at that time, my own research also took a serious turn. So, over a period of time, I found that other problems were the physical problem. If a classroom was given to me, which was going to accommodate 20 students, I would get 60 students in that class. So 60 students cannot be accommodated in a classroom of 20. Now, how does one accommodate them? How does one reach out to them? And it requires a lot of physical effort. There were no mics at that time. And the students also started having so many other avenues. They would enroll for many courses which were outside the college, but which were probably going to be their future. They would take up uh, fashion designing, for example, or any other thing. So uh, the classroom size, the number of students, the lack of infrastructure uh, also began to take a toll. And I'm not complaining again, but if I had a class on the ground floor, the next class would be on the fourth floor. So, and then the students would take time to come, because only when their previous class is over, then they can climb up and come. By that time, half the period would be over. So, over a period of time, I realized that this is not something that is going to work out on a long term basis. And if my interest is now focused wholly on research, it would be wise and fair to everyone that I apply for VRS. So I applied for VRS. I'm glad that I took that decision. First of all, the students were spared of me. And then, I could spend the full day in any library that I chose to. Now, to come to the problem of how do you begin research? You see, in Delhi, I can say, it is very difficult to do research because of lack of facilities. By lack of facilities, I mean, supposing you're going to choose a topic. When you start the topic, you don't know where the material is going to be. So you go to standard places like Teen Murti, ICHR, you go to the Archaeological Survey of India, you go to National Archives. And the point is that at no place do you get the entire material. You
Yes.
don't even know what you're looking for initially. So the point is, if you go to the National Archives, I'm sure you have used it. It's a very tedious process that you go and give the application on that these are the files you want, and 3 days later you have to find out whether the files have come or not. I mean, I'm not blaming anyone because that is the way system operates. But for a researcher with limited means, it becomes a very difficult journey. So, I mean, I remember every bit of the journey because it was, I mean, I don't know how to put it, it was a very, very slow, painful, and tedious journey.
Yes,
But
almost an uphill
again,
battle, but you never gave
uphill
up.
battle.
I
Yes,
just wanted to
uphill
ask you,
battle.
see, your first book was on the Congress Party, the role of caste in Indian politics. I think you took 1967 to 77, and that book came out, Vikas published it in 1991. And then you got into this whole textbook thing, and it was the first NDA government with Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and they were looking at these textbooks. I think Dr. Murli Manohar Joshi was the education minister, and you wrote this book called Flawed Narratives, and you looked at Satish Chandraji's medieval India, and then you also did a book on the Raja Munje Pact. Now these are
No, I
all,
just want to clarify this.
yeah, yeah. With
See,
Devendra Swaroop ji,
no,
right?
no, I just want to clarify. I wrote the medieval India textbook for NCRT for class
Yes,
11. Now,
yes,
when
yes,
that book came out, uh, the barrage of criticism from the left.
yes, yes.
So this book that you're talking about, it was a refutation of the points that they had raised.
Exactly.
So my
2002.
textbook,
Yes,
so my textbook on medieval India was very different from this response of the left historians to that. So they're
yes,
two different things, and
yes.
of course, uh, I'm proud of that textbook. because it was written in a very nuanced, balanced way, but it
Yes, yes,
was highlighting
yes.
so many dimensions of our history which were finding no place in the textbook.
I
And
think it's still in print. I think the book is still in print.
no, I
If
don't
I'm
think
not,
so.
oh, it's not.
See,
Okay. I think, but
yeah,
it came out in 2002 or so, around that time.
but what happens is that I wrote the book on the basis of a syllabus which was provided to me by NCRT. So
Correct.
it's not that I had complete freedom to do whatever I wanted. I wrote within the confines of that syllabus. I did not transgress. And I also felt that most of the students will not study history after they leave school. Because
Yes.
in college, most of the students do not opt for history, isn't
Yes.
it? They
Yes.
opt for whatever subject. So,
Yes.
and I never know, even though the book was criticized, but it was criticized because of the orientation that I gave.
Yes. Yes.
It
I
was
mean,
not
that's for
it
the
was not
facts
criticized.
or for the methodology. Absolutely. No, what
It
I was
was
really, yeah, trying to get at was that, there is a kind of turning point in your own oeuvre, as I see it, which happens around 2010, maybe. You come out with this book on the, Hindu Muslim relations, which is again a very controversial topic. And everybody's tried to paper over the violent conflicts that happened in the so-called medieval period, and they tried to come up with this Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb without really talking about who's assimilating with whom and who has the power
yes,
and in which direction these so-called assimilations or absorptions or whatever appropriations even are happening anyhow. But I'm saying after that you're really pivoting in, Rama and Ayodhya 2013. So I'm saying that there is a certain almost steady movement, and that controversy with the medieval textbook that you wrote really brought the fight out into the open. Then it became
yes,
impossible. You can't
yes,
ride two horses, right? Or you can't
yes.
change boats in midstream. So many of us in my book, I call it the Dakshinayan,
Hmm,
so to
hmm,
speak, which is how we
hmm.
became, so to speak, Dakshin Panthis, though I don't see
Yes,
myself branded in any such fashion. But what really happened to many of us, we started seeing things with clearer vision, and we found the other side constantly refusing to accept facts, arguments, the most reasonable assumptions or evidence, and so ideologically blinded, almost to the point of you know
yes,
I would say of fanaticism or insecurity. And I wanted to ask you about a very interesting facet even of this whole Ayodhya debate, that I don't think the Muslims were standing up so much, though they were being, promoted and supported and fomented and abetted. It's really the Indian so-called secular, liberal left. So it was a fight.
yes,
It was an uncivil war between the Hindus themselves. And even,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, go ahead. So I wanted you to tell us how you actually sort of came out in the open, because there was a gradual accretion, I think. And after that medieval textbook, then you indeed went towards Rama and Ayodhya, and I think it was 2013.
Yeah. So, as I told you, when I took up this, why did I take up this book, Ram and Ayodhya? Actually, after the Allahabad High Court judgment, somebody gave me a 90-page pamphlet which was written by eminent historian Professor Irfan Habib of Aligarh Muslim University. And in that pamphlet, he said that the ASI report is so idiotic, the Allahabad High Court judgment is even more idiotic, and the Supreme Court will have no option but to overturn this judgment. So when I read this bold assertion by Professor Habib that the Supreme Court will have no option but to overturn the judgment, that is when I read the 5,000 page judgment of Justice Sudhir Agarwal and the other two judges, which was smaller in. When I read that judgment, I was shocked at how the left historians had distorted that judgment and overturned and overlooked the glaring weaknesses in the Muslim side. Now, as I told you when I was writing the book on Ayodhya, I want you to see what the Muslim side has to say because as a historian, I should get both sides. Now, the Allahabad High Court asked the Muslim side because it was hearing both sides. So it said the mandir was demolished in 1528. All right, till 1858 when the East India Company enters that area. That is 300 years.
300 years.
So, can you give us any evidence of your presence at that site during those 300 years? Because the temple party gave the accounts of foreign travelers, they gave the accounts of the first settlement officer of Ayodhya, his report, the revenue records of the British period, and also the cases that were fought in the Faizabad district court from 1858 onwards. So they said, we would like to hear because we have to take an impartial view. And the masjid side could not provide any evidence of their presence there till 1858, which means that they possibly came to that site when the British entered that area in 1858. So, this was something that was amply demonstrated in Sudhir Agarwal's judgment. Then, he examined the ASI records, the excavations, and the ASI excavations was so important because they pushed back the antiquity of that site by 1,000 years. We did not know that that site was 1,000 years older. We had thought, and they confirmed, this is spectacular, they confirmed the Hindu belief that Ramayana came before the Mahabharata. One thing that has really amazed me about the study of Hindu civilization or Indian civilization is how the popular memory has always been reinforced by excavations, epigraphs, textual accounts. It is absolutely fascinating. So, this antiquity, then all that they found there was only remnants of Hindu terracotta or Hindu temple sites. Then the revenue records. The British were very great at preparing revenue records because that was their primary
Tax. The
interest.
tax base. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first revenue record that they prepared for Ayodhya dated 1861 because they came there only after the Great Revolt of 1857. So they prepared this tax and settlement. And that settlement of 1861 did not mention Babri Masjid.
Huh.
It mentioned the site as Janamsthan.
Janmasthan, correct.
The revenue records were available to the public because if you have any objection, you can look at that and then say this is not correct. So 1861, when the revenue records were made public and the site was labeled Janamsthan, there was no protest from the other side. That continued right till the last revenue record. So, and the Faizabad district court, it is surprising how the papers that were filed by both parties had that survived the rain, the termites, whatever it was, perhaps somebody was protecting them. And those revenue records showed that there was, the amazing amount of evidence that was there in the judgment. So I realized that this is, not correct for Professor Irfan Habib to say that the Supreme Court will overturn the judgment. The Supreme Court has no option but to reaffirm the judgment given the volume of the evidence.
It was a scandal. There were many so called JNU eminent historians who also testified, and many of them said they knew nothing of that history. They were not even equipped to read the inscriptions, and yet they had earlier testified that there was no Hindu temple. So as we read the judgment, we see this scandalous record of.
Can I just give one example?
Please,
There
please,
was
please.
a lady, she did her PhD on Vaishnavism, and she said Ram worship was established from the 2nd century Common Era. That's her PhD thesis. And when she went to Allahabad High Court, she says there's no evidence of Ram worship before the 18th century. So this is the kind of,
It's shocking. That's what I'm
it's
saying.
shocking.
It is scandalous and shocking. And, now that we are talking about a certain gentleman, I also heard from reliable sources, and you can correct me, that he and his father was also a very eminent historian at the same university. They, around partition and before also, they cornered all the relevant manuscripts, which were largely in Persian,
Yes,
that nobody else had access to a lot of
yes,
that material.
yes,
So you
yes.
see, what I'm trying to say is that forget about the academic ethics that we
Mm,
talk about so much. This was a complete, what should I say, a complete hatchet job, and the interests were very clear. It was actually a fight for the soul of post-independence India, not pre-independence.
yes,
So,
absolutely.
so it's a very interesting thing. The past was only a ruse. The fight was really about, who is going to hold the reins of power in Delhi and what ideology will underwrite it. But I want to ask you just one last question before we close this episode. Again, on Ayodhya, one of my friends, Abhas Maldhaiyar, has written a book on Babur. I don't know if
Mm.
you've seen it.
I
But
know of the book, but I have not yet had time to go through it.
so he says that Mir Taki and Babur did not actually destroy that mosque. So I don't know if you. I'm not an expert, so I just wanted you
But I
to.
don't know on what basis he is saying this because I have not read the book.
Okay, okay, okay. It's something, but I mean, he gives a lot of, so to speak, evidence to
I
show that.
just want to say one thing, two things, in fact. As far as the demolition is concerned, when the demolition took place, between two walls, there was an inscription embedded that fell down. That inscription was in pristine condition because it had been embedded between two walls. And that inscription gave the details of who built the mandir, in
Mandir.
what year, what dynasty, and it was for Dashavatar Ram. So all those things were very clearly stated. And I don't know, since I've not read the book, I don't know whom he attributes the destruction of the temple to.
Yeah,
I
he
don't,
says it was later. I think he says it happened later. But he talks about records which show that worship continued after that so-called date of destruction attributed to Mir Baki. And of
no,
course,
but
records of the Muslim historians, as usual, they're not entirely precise. Like even with Nalanda, there was a lot of debate about which, which monastery or which university was being referred to, and so forth.
but
So,
but I
unless
just want to,
historians have always made
no,
use of
no,
some
I
of this.
agree, but I want to say about this Ayodhya that after the mandir was demolished, we have many eyewitness accounts who went there and who said that Hindus come there. They
Exactly,
take a
worship continued. That's my point.
worship continued. Doesn't mean that the temple was existing.
Right, right, right,
They are
right.
two different things.
Yes, yes, yes.
So they
Yeah,
say the
his only point is, I think that the actual destruction and the construction, etc., whatever happened later. But I mean, we leave that out. But I think that I'm, in fact, in some ways, I'm not at all, as it were, anxious or disturbed that these facts of history, as E.H. Carr called them, are so much in dispute when it comes to India because
But
we
for
don't live.
Ayodhya, I don't think there's any. I've not read the book, so I
Yeah,
cannot
yeah,
say.
yeah,
But
yeah.
the facts point to the fact that it was destroyed by Babur. And I'll just
Okay,
end
okay.
by one comment. Babur is not known to have built mosques outside India.
Exactly, exactly.
So when he came to India, he built many mosques, but three of them are identified with him because of inscriptions.
Hmm.
So he chose three sites very carefully.
I
One
see.
was One was at Panipat because he won North India at the Battle of Panipat. The second was at Sambhal, and
Oh, yeah,
Sambhal, there was a temple there.
to Kalki,
And
right?
yeah, and the Hindu belief was that the Kalki avatar will be born there. And the third was at Ayodhya. So, there are so many things which have to be factored in before
Yes,
you
yes.
take a definitive view. And
True,
if,
true. And I'm saying the Sambal thing is not yet resolved. But
yes,
I really think this is so important because the attempt was actually not only to destroy Hindu civilization, but also prevent its resurrection because you're trying to destroy the avatar to come,
I
and
want
to
to ask you
thereby,
one question. Correct.
yes,
I want to ask you one question. In North India,
yes,
can you name a single temple that predates the 18th century?
my goodness, absolutely. It is,
And it's all
uh,
documented in my books. I've documented.
yes.
It's not that I'm just making a rabble rousing statement.
Totally, totally.
You know,
What about? Of course, we are getting a bit sidetracked, but what about Vrindavan? Don't you think that after Chaitanya's visit, they came up with a deal to make temples in between Agra and Delhi before the 18th century? There were some temples
that's
made.
a very long story,
Mhm.
which we can discuss sometime later. I'll just make two, 3 points. Mahmud Ghaznavi destroyed Mathura,
Yes,
and we have inscriptions to say that it was the birthplace.
yes,
Because Mathura was destroyed so many times,
so
but we
many
still
times.
have we still have the Vasu door jam inscription,
Yes,
which is
yes,
in Mathura Museum, and it's the earliest where a person is saying that I've built this shrine at the Mahasthan of Vishnu. I will
Mhm.
not say Janamsthan, he says Mahasthan.
Last.
So after that, just to cut the long story short, when Mahmud Ghaznavi destroys that temple, 100 years later, again a partial inscription has survived by chance, and it is this person, Jaja. Who he is, we don't know. And that partial inscription says, I'm proud to have rebuilt the Krishna temple.
Temple, correct.
So, temples are being built, but they're not grand structures, they're remnants of that demolished temple that they're using. Why are they doing it? Because they say our gods don't leave us, we cannot leave our gods. This was the sentiment behind it. Everywhere, everywhere. Kashi was built so many times, but does not mean that it was built the grand
Yes,
Vishwanath temple.
yeah, they would not allow a grand
It was just
structure.
modest structures, modest
Yes.
structures.
And hidden
Just to,
structures,
hidden, hidden,
courtyard structures
absolutely. Yes,
under the people tree, painted
yes,
stone. So
yes.
it's an amazing story. And anyhow, it's wonderful also reading your books because we also know the God's return. So, on that note, thank you so much. And we'll join you soon again. I hope just starting, to tip our toe in the Somnath story. So, viewers, once again, do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you, Dr. Jain, and namaste.